I like lots of wheat. And then this is specifically around the oats and the different types of oats that you get. So I've listed them there. You get oats, groats, oat malt, rolled oats, torrefied oats, flaked oats, and instant oats. So that's why when you get to the shop and in your recipe it just says oats, and you look at all this like, now what? So, like I said, it's all based on homebrewer methods. And then when the people that know what they're talking about start talking about things like diastatic power and enzymes and saccharification and things like that, then we're often lost. So I found the simplest explanations of what they are that I could find and put it into, now all of these are encyclopedias for that one word. So to put it into one sentence, this is about the best I could do. So the diastatic power, okay, we all know what malting is. So the diastatic power is your malt's ability to break down starches into sugars by the enzymes. And then the enzymes are protein catalysts that speed up the chemical reactions. Is actually a different word that they used, and I didn't think I could pronounce it, so I just put it down like this. So it's converting the substrate molecules into product molecules, which is obviously the sugars that we want. Then the saccharification is actually that process, is turning it into the fermentable sugars. Then we often hear, especially on the oats, when people say, no, if you're going to use oats, you need to cook them first, or you need to do a 40-degree stand, or whatever the case. That's to do apparently with the gelatinization, which is the process of rendering the starches soluble. So when you cook oats for breakfast, you'll see as soon as you add the oats to the water and you stir, eventually it thickens up a little bit, and then you leave it to simmer for a while. So that simmering process is obviously keeping it at that temperature. And if you stop stirring, you'll actually see that thickness goes away. All the real thick bits come to the bottom, and then there's like a thin, creamy layer that's at the top. So now you're going past the gelatinization, and it's actually separating again. And that's what you want when you're brewing, because you don't want that porridge. That's the easiest way to get a stuck mash. Okay, where they talk about modified malt, so modification is the degree to which the malt endosperm is converted. So, okay, well, we've all gone through the malting process already, so I don't have to carry on about that. Then melanoidin, you often hear people talking about melanoidin malt or melanoidin flavors in the beer, and I always never understood what it was when people spoke about it. So I did some reading and research on it, and basically it's just when you bake a bread, that burnt black crust on top, that aroma and that flavor comes from what they call a Maillard reaction, and that is melanoidin aroma and melanoidin flavor, basically, in a nutshell. Okay, so we'll start with barley as the raw grain. Something that I put right at the end of the thing, but I can actually touch on it now, is when you work with ingredients, the more that is done to your ingredient before you start using it, the less leeway you have of changing what it can give you. I'll get more into that just now. So we all start with malt. So during the malting process, obviously they dry the malt afterwards so that you're able to use it. So depending on the temperature that you dry it, you get your base malts and then your slightly roasted malts. Something else that I learned about the slightly roasted malts, like your amber malts, roast malts, or low-end roast malts, and yeah, even some of the Munich malts. When you start getting Munich 2, and a little bit up from that, is the diastatic power of that malt is actually only enough to convert itself. You know, sometimes they often talk about the percentage of types of malt that you can add into your beer and how much pale malt you have to add in to be able to convert other malts as well. So some of the base malts that are kilned at a slightly higher temperature actually can only convert themselves. So if you use like a Munich 2 as your base malt, and then you add in something that's been kilned way above that, there actually aren't enough enzymes in your base malt to convert the other malts as well. So you end up with some flavor from it, but not a lot of the sugar content, yeah. And then often people use substitutes in their recipes. So you're substituting your recipes as a home brewer, especially when you start using Beer Smith or your grandfather app, whatever the case is. You look at the recipe and you think, I don't have this malt as a specialty malt, and then you go look at what you do have. Oh, well, this one's the same color, so we'll just use this one. it gives you, it gives you the same color, so we'll just use this one. Now the difference between your roasted and normal kiln malts and your crystal malts is, if you try and make the crystal malt, or when they make the crystal malts, they take it directly while it's still wet, and then they do it like a mash cycle, similar to what we do as brewers, where they convert those starches into sugars, but they do it inside the husk. And obviously with a lot less liquid, many processes that it goes through, and it liquefies that, or semi-liquefies those sugars inside the husk. Then they roast that at varying temperatures to get different kinds of crystallization of those sugars. Like when you're a lighty and banging around, you take a pan, you put it on the stove, and you just put sugar in. And then you start crystallizing those sugars, and the longer you leave it, you make your own caramels and whatever the case is. It's exactly what's happening inside those husks. Well, I say exactly, but similar. And then obviously, when you're doing roast barley, you don't, none of your enzymes or your starches or anything like that are, really usable. It's more just flavor and levels of roastiness. So they're not going to go through the whole process of malting it and then burning everything up. So they just burn it. They just roast the barley as it is instead of malting it first. Okay, so wheat. Now we start with wheat. Before we get to the oats, it's probably the other main ingredient that a lot of brewers use in their processes. Much to the dislike of some people that don't like wheat. Anyway, so the malted wheat goes through the same processes as malted barley. Then your flaked wheat, torrefied wheat, chocolate wheat, those are all unmalted. And your flaked wheat is actually rolled through heated rollers, and there's instant changes and gelatinization that happens in the grain at the time, and so then those starches and sugars are available immediately, but there's no enzymes left. So obviously, with that kind of with flaked wheat and torrefied wheat, you have to put it with other malt that has got enzymes that can actually convert it. And then your torrefied wheat, they used, it says exposed to high temperature fluidized bed of hot air. I don't know if that's the same as steam. But that's what they put in there. So it's obviously, when I say hot temperature, it's like extreme heat, 400 degrees or something like that, but for a very, very short period of time. And then what happens is, it's like popcorn. Yep. So they also do it they first do it like kind of a vacuum, and Then they release the vacuum under that high pressure, and it pops just like popcorn does, and it comes up as puffy wheat. Yeah. So that's the process it goes through to actually get there. Once again, because of the extreme temperatures, no enzymes left. The starches become, for some other reason, I also don't know the biology behind it. The starches are much easier to use at that point.
Breaks the cell walls.
Yes, there we go. Yeah.
Puffy wheat.
Yeah.
Puffy wheat.
And then obviously chocolate wheat I've used once or twice in a stout. It's really, really nice to use. But you have to use it sparingly. For some other reason, if you use a lot of chocolate wheat, you get such extreme roastiness and acrid burnt flavors, you know. So, but it's nice to use, you just got to use very little. Okay, then the oats. So, as home brewers, we like to experiment with things, but also because you're doing 20 liters of beer and it takes you the whole day, you don't want to waste your money and waste your time in something that you don't know what you're doing. So I think that's one of the reasons why people are afraid to do new things unless they've heard somebody else do it. And using oats, we heard from Dion yesterday, using oats in the stout to add body. I think that's what most of the people use oats for, is to add body without actually increasing the alcohol and changing the flavors too much, although the oats give really nice rounded flavors in your beer anyway. Okay, once again, when they break up the oats, or when they take the husk off, that bit that's left, I don't know why it actually changed its name, but then from oats it becomes groats. And, yeah. And then you can malt it as well. I actually haven't ever used malted oats. I don't know who has used malted oats. Okay.
It sucks. Very good. You need to have a very good milk.
It does not suck.
Okay. Well, the process to malt it is also the same as malted barley and wheat.
Yes.
And then the same process that we spoke about for the wheat, they use on oats as well. So your flaked oats is also rolled at high temperatures. Sometimes they do it with the husk on, or they can do it without the husk. They just do it like that. If you are going to use rolled oats, try and find the ones with the husk on, because then it helps a lot with your loutering. You don't have to add in rice hulls or oat hulls or anything like that with it, because it's squashed like that as well. It's exposed. You don't have to mill it, and the inside of the grain is already exposed and it's flat, giving you a nice big surface area to work with. And the same with torrefied oats. Now they also do different processes with the torrefied oats, where sometimes it's rolled and torrefied. I don't know why you would do that, because both processes bring out the same product. I think it's also maybe just to expose the surface area so that it becomes usable quicker or something like that. And then instant oats, when you go shopping and you look for flaked oats, and then you see, right, here's your jungle oats,
Woolworths.
Traditional Checkers for me.
Jungle oats and instant oats.
I'm employed by Checkers, so it's always Checkers.
No. Checkers, no.
But you get tiger oats, jungle oats. No, but there's different roll thicknesses. So the tiger oats is a thicker roll than jungle oats. It's made of the same pattern.
But it's a bigger, what do you call it, oats. The jungle oats.
Yeah.
I mean, tiger oats seems to be much bigger in size.
Yes, it is.
Than the thicker roll.
It's a thicker roller, yeah. So if you're making your own muesli, tiger oats is great.
Yes.
But for brewing, you want it flatter.
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, you know, the more that's done to your raw product before you start using it, the less leeway you've got of using it in different ways. So I've done, one of my favorite beers to brew is a Witbier, and I use unmalted wheat. Sometimes I use unmalted barley in it as well, and lots of oats and malted wheat as well. So sometimes I can't brew it without rice hulls or oat hulls. There's just no way, because it's just one lump of porridge. But I have found that if I start with the rawest possible type of oats, I get such a better rounded finish than if I use instant oats. Now the advantage of using instant oats is you can just, once it gets into warm water, because it's already been cooked, all the processes that you want to do with it have already been done. But for some other reason, I think you've lost some of the flavors. But I mean, it's the same when you're having breakfast. You take your time, and it takes you 10 minutes to cook a bowl of jungle oats from scratch. With an instant oats, you just add water and you mix it. I'm telling you now, there's a difference in the flavor. Your proper lengthy oats is much better. And it's the same in your beer.
So we did an experiment for the club at one stage
With
any stout recipe, and we added oats in 3 ways. So we just took the oats and we added to his recipe, raw instant oats, into the mash. Then we took another batch and we pre-cooked them in the oven at 230 until they started getting their biscuit flavor. All right, and we put that in for the second batch. And the third one, we took the instant oats and we pre-gelatinized it and added it to the mash. And you can't believe the 3 different beers that came out of that. It was stunning.
Like all other grains, it's very versatile. It's just the limitations of it obviously is because it becomes very stodgy. That's where your main limitation is with oats.
Sorry, the other day I had a customer, we didn't have torrefied oats, and they just used jungle oats, and he said his gravities were really low due to, and he asked me if it was because of the oats. And
See, then again, it depends on what is done with it, because you have to
I'm assuming
change
he
it.
just chucked it into the mash.
Yeah, you see, that's not going to work because it's not then reached your gelatinization temperature of oats. It's not the same as the things you're going to get from your normal malts.
So in Belgium, they actually, a lot of the traditional breweries, while I was doing my talk, yes, I forgot to talk about it. They actually have they have separate cereal cookers for their wheat and ice to get to the right gelatinization temperature to their barley mash.
Yeah, that's on the next
I feel your pain, Lee.
He's jumping the gun.
If I'm using flaked oats, I've got to cook them essentially.
Yes.
Otherwise, I'm
Yeah,
going to
there's
do a
also-
low gravity.
Some people say you just got to, if you do a mash stand at 40 degrees or something like that, it changes certain characteristics of it. I didn't get enough into that. I just went for the pre-cook them. If you pre-cook them, obviously it's the same as when you eat them. When you taste it when it's raw, it's like malt, it's bitter. And once it's been cooked, it's sweet. So then I always just make sure that taste it, it's sweet. This is what I need to get out of it. So I don't do the 40-degree stand with the oats or anything like that. Okay, some things to ponder when you're using oats. When you're shopping, any unflavored version of oats will work, or wheat. If you're not gonna, unless you're Rudy, you're not gonna put strawberry flavored oats in your.
Strawberry milkshake.
Strawberry milkshake.
It's a bit like that. Yes.
The word is bourgeoisie. It's a Joburg joke.
It's a Joburg joke.
Sorry.
Okay, denatured. As I was saying just now, some of the malts have got just past the amount of roasting that it takes to denature all of the enzymes. So they only have enough enzymes to convert themselves and not the other grains in there. So just when you're working out your recipe, just be aware of which ones you're adding. So if you don't need to target gravity, you can go back to your recipe and say, right, this is probably why. we described this earlier as well as a rule of thumb. Look for whatever product you've got that has had the least done to it, because then you can get the most out of it. You can manipulate it the way you want to, and not only use it for its single function. And preventing a stuck mash, first prize, rice or oat hulls. A lot of recipes call for 5% of your unhulled grain, if you want to call it that. So you just add up how much you use of your oats, wheat, rice, whatever the case is that you're using that doesn't have holes on it. I use 10%, because I really don't want to stuck mash. And it's always worked for me. The other, what they claim is if you use too many rice hulls, because you just want to be safe, it starts giving you like an acrid astringency. Tannins. Yeah, tannins in your beer. So try and stick between the 5 and 10% if you are using it. I haven't, since I've started using that, I haven't had a stuck mash in any of my hybrid beers.
But when you're doing this, do you throw the rice hulls just straight into the bottom of the mash tun and put everything on top, or is it just mixed?
No, I actually put, because they're not adding value to the actual grain, I put them in first.
Yeah.
So they can first absorb water and straighten out and lengthen, because they, especially the oat hulls, they're long and curly. So you chuck that in first so that they absorb the liquid, and then I put the mash in the malt in after them.
So they form that kind of bottom base then, filter almost.
Yes.
Underneath the water.
Yeah. And then the other way, like Bruce was saying, if you know and understand cereal mashing, you can cook it in such a way at low temperatures to also help prevent it becoming stodgy and thick and stuck in your mash. I haven't done that because I don't understand it yet. So your flaked and rolled products don't need to be milled because they are often flaked and rolled with the husk on. So you don't have to add that into your equation if you are going to use rice hulls. And if you use raw wheat, mix it with your other malt before you put it through your mill, because it's like putting freaking diamonds through your mill. Yeah, they are extremely hard. I mean, when you raw wheat, you break your tooth. Yeah, if you try and bite it, it's very, very, very hard. But it adds so much to your beer. Raw wheat, love using it. And then protein is not the enemy. Everybody always says, this, you have to do this for the protein rest, and this protein, those are the proteins that you want in your beer. Obviously, from your hot and your cold break when you in your brewing process, because they also give long chains and it becomes bits in your beer. But the proteins that are left behind from your oats and your wheat, that are actually soluble in your beer, adds to those flavors and adds to the fullness of your beer and the mouthful of your beer. It's really, really good byproduct of using wheat and oats and things like that. And I think that's it. Yes. And we're going to love question and answers because I told you everything I know.